Okay, hello everybody. Welcome joining us at TCHS, Trenton Tornadoes. Happy to have you all here. We'd like to thank all the creators who joined us tonight. What we have with us are creators from the series Black, the hit independent series. We're going to go over a lot of things about the comic and the issues it addresses and the industry and how cool it is to be a creator and stuff like that. And we're going to take questions from our students. Kind of get started, we'll go around the horn if everybody wants to introduce themselves. We'll start with Kwanzaa and go across the screen. Is that cool?
Yeah, sure. I'm Kwanzaa Sajifo. I'm the co-creator and author of Black and subsequent books. And I'm glad to be here with you guys today.
Cool. I'm Tim Smith 3, artist and co-creator on Black as well. Worked with Kwanzaa for a very long time, and it's been a beautiful journey. So yeah.
I am Jamal Eigel on phones and drums. I am the interior artist on Black and on White. And thanks for having me.
My name is Vida Ayala. I am a comic book writer, and Kwanzaa had me come in and write Black AF Devils Die. So thank you for that. That was a joy.
Okay, cool. So I guess a little overview for those who are unfamiliar with the book. Black was a hit series, came out in 2016, correct guys? It's been a few years.
Time's a blur now.
Yeah, time is a blur
Thank
now.
you.
Pandemic, right? So it's been about 5 years, and it started off on Kickstarter, which is like a crowdfunding app and website. Huge hit, picked up by Black Mass Studios, ran for 6 issues, insanely popular, and then actually spun off into 3 miniseries that were tied to the book. And now this month, I believe, right, the sequel White starts hitting shops this month. I know the Kickstarter was already released.
I think next month, April.
Next month, okay, April.
Yep.
So very soon. The second series, the direct sequel to Black, White. And we'll talk a little bit about that too, soon to come. You guys want to give the audience a little feel of what the story was all about originally, to let them know if they're not familiar with the book?
Sure. So the premise of the entire universe is what if only Black people had superpowers? And the first book is around this young man, Kareem Jenkins, who has an unfortunate run-in with the police. He's shot and killed, but it's a superhero story. So he comes back to life, finds out he has superpowers, and that he's part of a very small percentage of Black people that have had powers over the centuries, but it's been kept a secret because obviously that would be disruptive to modern society. And that's sort of his conflict in the first book, is trying to determine whether or not that secret should remain in some respect. So, exposing it would probably just put a bigger target on Black people's back, but also not exposing it would kind of leave the status quo as it is. So it's sort of like a no-win situation for him to deal with. And he's only like 15. So like, no pressure. And on top of that, he has like a very unique power among empowered Blacks that an evil person, a villain, if you will, is after, so that he can get the powers for himself, because that's what all villains really want.
Yeah, what I found interesting was how you tied it to the genetic makeup, and then it expanded out from there. So it became almost like a potential commodity in and of itself, let alone the people who have the powers. The possibility of harnessing that for good or evil is definitely present in the stories, which makes it very interesting, and how people go about approaching that. How did you and Tim come up with the original idea?
I feel like that's such a long story that makes us both sound old.
Back in 1980.
No, I think like Tim and I actually, I was an intern at Marvel when I first met Tim. He was working in production, but the second time we reconnected, I think was it at Mocha?
Yeah, I think it was at Mocha. It was at a show. It's such a blur, but it was at a comic show.
Yeah,
sure.
but back in before times, we linked up, and I had the idea for what if only Black people had superpowers, predominantly because as a comic reader and a fan growing up, not seeing a lot of Black characters in comic books, and then working in the industry and seeing that like there weren't a lot of people of color working in comic books, and that was a strong correlation of why that wasn't present, kind of mixed in with like the idea that like, wow, a lot of these characters that we've been reading are supposed to represent the outsider, supposed to be analogies for, the oppression and discrimination that Black people face, but they're white people. So it's like, great, Tony Stark takes off his armor and he's still a rich guy, or like, the Thing, he's big and he's made out of bricks, but his family's like super famous and he gets to like live in a giant tower, or like, like Wolverine, he doesn't get pulled over, for driving a nice car. That doesn't happen. But I mean,
Only when he's
stuff,
trying to
it did
go
happen.
through the metal detector in the airport. That's
Yeah, which is always funny. That's always a good bit. But it's like those things that like were part of that are part of like our reality is like people of color didn't exist in these books in a way that like framed it correctly. It's just like, it's like for Black people, it's like we don't have sentinels, we just have the police, and that's a different presence than like big marauding robots. It's just like, no, it's just Officer Jack over there. And so I, way back when, brought the idea to Tim because I just really like his aesthetic style, and he was into the idea, and then we kind of sat on it for 10 years.
Like being in the industry, like you see, especially when you're behind the curtain and you get to see how a book is created, you get to see the talent that gets hired on a book. Out of all the books on the shelf, it's not a lot of books that really represent in the way that we would want representation to be shown in a particular story and in a particular comic or medium of Black people or just other cultures, period. So when Kwanzaa approached me and was like, I got this crazy idea, just a few words in, I was like, that's awesome. Yes, of course. The frustration of not being able to, I guess, see that representation all the time, and now being able to be a part of something is definitely appealing.
Very cool. So when you're coming up with the story and you've got that foundation, and you got this great premise for an idea, how do you then shift to the character development to fit that story? Or did you just say, here's the story I want to tell, what kind of powers would go with that? Or here's the characters I was thinking of, and then what kind of experiences would they go through? Which way did you kind of go about it?
I always write the characters first and like try to kind of create like a psych profile for them. And then I will create a scenario or story and then kind of throw that at them. And that makes it a lot easier to write them for me, because then I kind of have like almost like a reference point for like, all right, well, I've already said that this is who this character is. If I put them in the situation, how are they going to respond to it? Like, how are they going to interact in this sort of space? And it also helps because I forget a lot of stuff. So,
I mean, yeah, I got the characters up on the screen now. That some of the main characters from the stories, and the character profiles in each story are great. And one of the things I love, and I know it's silly, is how Kareem becomes this kind of background character in the spin-offs, but it still ties it kind of all together along with Juncture. And it's almost like, and this is my own like kind of guilty pleasure, I love seeing the kind of awkward situations you put him in, being this kind of like Superman type figure, but then like he gets locked out the club in the one book, and then in
oh yeah, that was a fun.
He gets stranded out in
I say
the
like
middle of nowhere by Eli, and he's supposed to be this like all-powerful being, and he's like, what the heck is
Yeah.
and then he kind of, is just kind of going with the flow and coming back into it.
But he's still 15, right? Like that makes the character more believable. It's like, yeah, you could have all this power, but if you're unsure of yourself or the situation, then that might not matter. And also, like, I feel like one of his strengths is that he's funny. So like you could really put him in situations and he kind of rolls with the punches. He's like, all right, I'm gonna figure this out, I guess. I can't punch my way out of this. Like
when I designed
Club was super fun for
me. I was
me.
gonna say, like, when I designed it, Jamal, when he came in and really put another definition to the character, I think a lot of comic book artists will draw, you see the definition 15 years old, 12 years old, but then most comic book artists would draw like crazy muscles.
Like a grown-up.
On the characters, like they're just jacked up. And one thing that Jamal super talented as he is, was like, he's a kid.
Mm.
And drew him like that. And I said, oh yeah, that's right. I think Jamal brings that added touch to these characters that makes it relatable from both a realistic standpoint and a comic book world standpoint. And that's what one of the charms that this has.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to go with next. Like, once you have these character designs, how did you and Jamal kind of collaborate to come up with these scenes and these moving on from the designs to the action and the story? Like, what was the artistic process like for you guys?
Well, I mean, Tim designed all the characters, so my job at that point is really to just sort of translate them into a style, into my style.
Mhm.
Tim and I, we have very different approaches. Tim is much more of a graphic artist, much more, I would, manga influenced in a lot of ways than I am. Although I am a fan of manga as well. You can, I'm more of a fan of like Ryuichi Ikegami and Katsuhiro Otomo as opposed to, Masame Shiro or, I'm reading this book right now, this series right now, which is really cool. And the artwork is just absolutely beautiful. And, the Inio Asano is the artist.
Okay, good, because I was going to say, I can't
So
see
good.
that, man. I can't see that.
Sorry. So it's just, so this is the type of stuff that, fits my aesthetic. So I was trying to bring that aesthetic to what Tim was designing. So, and then again, in the case with, Kareem, especially, like, yes, there was that idea of, I never saw him as being overtly jacked. Even, after the training sequence we do in the second issue of Black, he gets a little bit beefier and a little bit more defined as the series goes along. And then when you get to White, he's still like slight, but it's more like Bruce Lee muscle.
Yeah.
Where, where you can tell that he's tough and he's fast and, he's very skilled at what he does. So I wanted there to be an evolution for him visually.
Mhm. Yeah, and you could see the experiences that they go through kind of shape them and the things that happen, starting off in one position, and then the more, I guess, superheroing they do, the more the story changes and the characters interweave a little bit more. Even off the Officer Walters.
Oh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But so how do you then move on to the secondary series? So you go from, let me try to scroll back here a little bit because I'm used to these weird controls.
Beautiful.
Give me one sec.
I love America's Sweetheart so much. So they're all good. They're all amazing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In designing the characters, like when Kwanzaa, like he'll put the bio up. I'm sure the funny thing is, like, I know Kwanzaa has an idea of who the character is. Like, it probably, and Kwanzaa, correct me if I'm wrong, you probably can see the beginning, middle, and end with room to like expand on each character. But then I'll see that and I'll start coming up with that and then start tagging on my own thoughts of the character. And you get like these different aspects of the same character. Ultimately, what goes down is Kwanzaa's idea because he's got it mapped out in his head. For me, it's like that look and that feel. I have to like try to feel the character and see them move in my mind and how they move in society, how they play off of each other. I think that's a part of good character development. So when I came up with the characters, for the look at least, I was like, you know what? If this character stood next to this character, these would be their influences. And I think that's important for any story to tell, just like real people. If you hang out around someone often enough, you may start to take on some of the traits that they have, or you may start to like or dislike them as time went by. I kind of did that with certain characters that paired off with each other really well, but I just didn't say it out loud because I wanted to see what like Jamal would do with them in a room together. But that's kind of my thought process on it as well.
Yeah, I love how each of the spin-offs has and I think the share of artists across it contributed to that. But they all have a very unique style into each book. The design, the pencil work, the coloring, they all are their own title. Coming back to the original, of course, with the same characters, but even seeing Kareem in each book depicted slightly different was pretty cool to look at visually and appreciate. Um,
And two, even with story, you know, when I was brought in for Devil's Die, you know, Kwanzaa had an outline of stuff that was just big beats. It was like all you know, get from A to B to C to D. Just do that. That's your job. Fill in all the stuff in the middle. And he left a lot of room to really play with stuff, to put them in weird situations and see what happens, which is really great. Like I remember, like the club scene, he was like, "Yep, they have to go to this club and get this information from this character. Go with God." And I was like, "Great, awesome." And you know, I've worked on all kinds of licensed stuff, and work for hire, but in a creator-owned universe is something really different, where it does feel like you are really, you know, I felt like in Devil's Die, I got to really shape some of who Indigo would be going forward. That's one of the main characters.
Absolutely.
And that was really cool to be able to have that kind of like autonomy while still, you know, having those guides, so I didn't screw up anything in his universe.
I had nothing but faith in you, Vita, and that's why I wanted you to tackle like this book, because essentially my ultimate goal is to have more of that happen. You
I
know,
mean, it was
where
it's
it's
such a
like,
joy, like to be able to also work in different genres, right? So like you have Black that feels a little bit like it's not like a superhero book, but like it has that kind of feel, but it's also kind of a spy book, right? It has all of this like, you know, all these twisting and turning machinations in the background. To me, it felt very almost like La Femme Nikita, but like he's a little Black kid instead of like a French woman. But then, you know, you have America's Sweetheart, and that's very much like, I mean, it's a YA book, but it's also, you know, that's much more of a cape book, right? Like you read it and you're like, yes, this is superheroes. And then you have Devil's Die, and to me, I was like, oh, this is the crime book. That's what this is. This is like, yes, there are powers, but it's much more like noir and gritty and that kind of stuff. And it all is cohesive across the line. Like Widows and Orphans too is like, I mean, to me, that's the manga book, right? Like that's, and it has that energy to it, but you can pick up any of them and read them and you're like, yep, this takes place in the same universe. Like it's cohesive. It makes sense to me, you know, that these things are happening, you know, at the same time or near each other, which is awesome. It was such a joy to be able to kind of contribute to that in this way.
Very cool. And then one of the things I also as I'm going through the series, and I don't want to spoil anything for the people that want to read the books, because I also have a surprise for some of our audience later. One of the things that I found interesting that tied a lot of the stories together, and it's different for the main character in each book, but there's some sense of complicated, or I guess the best way, I don't have a word for it, but there's a family relationship between each of the main characters and somebody else in each of the stories. And it's this underlying theme, and none of the two relationships are the same, and it usually has a lot to do with the twist around the you know, after the halfway point of the book, and it changes the shape of the story. And then going back to the earlier chapters, it changes the interactions a little bit too. It gives clarity, but it also creates new conflict, and I thought that was a very I see Kwanzaa smiling, so I'm guessing that's deliberate. But could you go into that a little bit? I don't want to give away the characters and who's who and what's what, but you get what I'm trying to get at, right?
yeah, I mean, it's an interesting. It was definitely intentional, but also because I feel like it's really easy in a lot of comic book stories to make the conflict wholly be an antagonist who is from an exterior point of view, like an evil villain. But I think that the real conflicts, the ones that like really kind of hurt in some respect, are the ones that come from family, you know, or the ones that are like close to you in a way where it's like, even if it's a family figure, like even if it's found family, when you have like loss or conflict with them, that hits home in a different way. And you know, you know, because this is such a branded talk, I hate to bring up like, you know, another brand and stuff like that, but it's like that's why you care about like Professor X and Magneto, because they family.
Mhm.
Like
sure.
they're
Yeah.
brothers, you know, and like they have a serious conflict of like there's a schism there. And
Mhm.
that's what I tried to bring into all of these books,
That's yeah.
because I think all of us have that. You have that. Like you have that with your parents, you have that with your
Mhm.
siblings, you know,
Right.
there's that tennis spouses. I don't know. Like it's just like that's where people's main tensions lie. Like
Yeah.
none of us have arch enemies. Like raise your hand if you have a nemesis. Like I mean like a
Do they
straight up
have to know
nemesis.
that they're your nemesis, or can they
Right.
just be one side?
That's fair.
Those are different things.
Like I mean present times notwithstanding, before the last like 4 years, did any of us really have an actual like somebody out to get you nemesis?
Speaking of
Well, I can spill tea, but there's not enough time.
Right.
I was in third grade. It was a rough time.
Those things last, man.
yeah, because it was interesting that you're going in, and once you get what the gist of the book is about, you're expecting the social issues and the race issues that come up. But I think that everybody was approaching it from a different angle, and then once you found out those ties where you would expect two people to kind of have a similar experience, but there was something disjointed at some point that happened, shaped how their character developed around those social situations that they were dealing with. And I thought that was really well written throughout all the books that I enjoyed seeing and picking up on. One of the things before we open up to the Q&A soon, because I do want the audience to participate and hear what some of our students have to say. We talked about it at the beginning, but I'll go back. I mean, the visual style of the books plays in, but right away, seeing these books on the shelf was a very political statement as well. And the covers for the 6 issues of the series were in some ways, I don't want to say controversial, but the one was censored even. But they definitely say a message about social issues in our country right now, and a lot of feelings that a lot of people have about what our country is versus what it should be and what it acts like it is. How can I phrase the question? What was your approach in bringing this to light, not just in the covers, but throughout the story? How the dimensions in which you were tying these social issues to present and in a lot of ways past history? Because I think what was interesting was you get a sense that there's when you met the Man Corporation, you're seeing this the past history of understanding that this had been a secret, and you also see that with the government organization that's running too. And then at the same time, you're dealing with the present day of what our country is going through and how this would shape us if we found out today. So the hidden history and the present history. How did you try to balance that with the story of the family and the characters, and how did you approach that in the art and in the and in the story as well?
Well, I think for the covers, that's straight up 100% Kari. You know, he kind of set the tone there when we were doing the original cover for Black. You know, I was expecting a Kari Randolph special. You know, like Kari has a style that's very recognizable, and I figured we were going to get stuff that was more akin to the things he was doing at Marvel and DC. And he's just like, no, I have it. He read the scripts and he's just like, I have something different in mind for this. And he just said the word Banksy to me, and I was just like, all right, let's go.
Yeah.
And then he hit us with the drop, and that pretty much set the tone for what the rest of the covers could be, because originally we were going to do Black as just like an original graphic novel, and when the opportunity to do periodicals came up, we were like, okay, well, how do we top that?
Yeah.
And so we set out with the rest of the covers is just kind of have them represent themes that were in the book and that were happening, but also that were in relation to the present, and try and do that in a way that like told a story all by themselves.
And the 3 color tones and the imagery definitely jump off the shelf when you walk past it, let alone what the pictures are saying. Just the style is very, eye catching, the black, the white, and the red, and the way the covers were designed, I thought was great. And then I thought the interiors build on that style in some of the scenes too, which was cool to see from Jamal and the others. And then one other thing I want to bring up. was. No, I'll come back. I want to give a chance because I know we're getting into about a half hour into the conversation. I do want to hear from our audience. So, what is it okay with everybody if we kind of open it up for the Q&A right now?
Yeah.
If we have stuff to come back
Yeah,
to,
sure.
We'll take that time at the end too and see where it goes. Great. Let me see if there's anything in the chat so far. Yeah, the Donkey Kong throwback with Trump, one of my co-teachers. It was funny. I met Liana at a show, and it turned out we live like 10 blocks from each other when she was living in Highland Park. So we kind of became, friends, went to the same LCS and stuff. And then she kind of ran around for the one New York Comic Con and got all you guys to sign. I had the special edition with the Trump cover on the trade. The one last thing I did want to get to before we open it up, I'm sorry, is also a lot of you guys are now, you're doing the philanthropy work. I do have the
Oh, cool.
cover. So I actually got this from you guys at the table at New York Comic Con that year. I ran over to the Black Mass table after hearing about the book. You want to talk a little bit about that cover and some of the philanthropy work you guys do before we open it up? I do want to make sure that gets brought up. So sorry, guys.
Yeah, I think we always try to do something that gives back to various organizations. When the George Floyd protests were going on, we dusted off our online store, and we're selling T-shirts with all the art from the covers on it, and it was going towards various bail funds around the country. Because protesters tend to not have thousands and thousands of dollars to get out of jail that they've wrongly been arrested for and put in. So we wanted to do something that could actually help with that. And so we were lucky enough to raise a few $1,000s for a lot of those funds and stuff, and be able to just contribute and give back, because that's something inherent in the entire project. Part of it isn't just the representation of people in the content. We hire Black as well. It's that's in our core, because that's who the story is about. That's who's telling the stories. And of course they are all talented and amazing first, my colleagues and stuff, but it's also important to me that they feel some investment in there. They feel like they're doing something for
even
the
when
culture.
you guys even when you guys started off, though, I mean, wasn't the funds from the variant going to Black Lives Matter? And this is
Yep.
like 5 years ago. So even before you guys had the clout that you have now, I mean, you guys were still doing what you could, which it was one of the things I respected right out of the gate when I saw that.
It doesn't really take a lot to do that sort of stuff, and I'm surprised more people don't just give a little something.
It's also too we're Black. This is very important. This is our daily reality. So it's it just makes sense that this is something that we're trying to make known and also help with. But also, I will say too that I know Kwanzaa also just is this kind of person. In general, he sees an injustice and he's like, nah, bet, all right, let's this is no good. And he's always been that kind of person. So no one should be surprised that this is what he does.
It's great to go to the conventions and meet the people, because this started off as a Kickstarter, and I can't speak for everyone, but doing the Kickstarter, you do wonder, will this get backed? You put your heart and soul into it, but you're still gonna doubt, is this good enough? And then when you find out that it is good enough, and then you're like, well, only Black people are gonna buy this, no one else is gonna buy it. But then you find that a lot of people want to see this type of story from all shades. You can't help but to think well, I got the support from people. How can I support people back, not just through the story, but in other ways? What more can I do? Because if that's what got us to this point, we gotta be able to do something to give back.
And even Andy, who was jealous of Jamal's mic setup earlier, our teachers, he, even before I got onto it, he already went to the librarians to have them order copies of the Access Guide that Kwanzaa contributed to, and that will be coming out. So our library is going to have copies of that at the school for kids looking for creators and stories like this, and kind of share in that spirit, which is great. So and let alone we put books like this in the club and make sure the library gets what it can. When we run our club, when we were actually in person, over the years, I took all collections and contributions. Erica Schultz donated a bunch of stuff. We got like 300 graphic novels. The library has a couple hundred manga. You know, we put that out for the kids and stuff too, to make sure they have this stuff. And we, you know, put out, you know, here's the picks of the month, and we make sure there, you know, there's diversity in there, and different stories, and coming out of these different ways. So it's definitely great to see when a title like this is becoming popular, and the people who created it are so involved and care about it. So it's nice. And that's definitely something we want our kids to see. And that's why we appreciate you guys being here too. So I think this is a good time. Let's open it up to the audience, because I'm sure there's some questions that have come up that they definitely want to ask. So anybody that wants to chime in on the audio, you're welcome to turn your mics on. If you're having a problem turning your mic on for whatever reason, just message in the chat. You're welcome to ask the questions either way, and we'll kind of see what pops up. Anybody want to go?
Don't be shy.
Yeah.
If you have like questions on just the industry as it is, you know, like all of us, we're creators collectively, many years of experience of just working with not only being in the industry, but being creators on our own projects as well. So yeah, feel free to ask anything.
Looks like
I know some of our kids are a little shy right now, so I know a few are going to be typing in the chat, so we'll give them a second to chime in, especially because I'm starting to stumble over my words a little bit. So
it's 7:30, 7:40.
I wanted to say I am actually very impressed with you guys. My name is Michael Tucker. I'm the father of Sierra Tucker here. And I just wanted to say I'm really impressed with y'all work. I actually, while you were on there discussing this, I actually Googled you guys. I actually met a couple of you guys at comic conventions way back when. And when you were all working for other companies, not when you were working on Black. I haven't been to a comic convention in a minute, which I'm kind of upset about. But I recognize several of you guys, and now that y'all working together on this project, you guys are living the dream that I actually tried to fulfill. I mean, I'm feeling some type of way. I'm happy and a little bit jelly at the same time, but you know, and I'm looking forward to delving more deeply into your storyline, because it seems very interesting. From the discussion and from what I've read so far, because I'm finding it online, and it seems that you guys took a route that has really piqued my interest. Um, I'm curious what y'all gonna do next in terms of white versus black, and I am also curious with several, you know, like more characters y'all gonna bring into play. You know, because I know building a universe is kind of can be complicated and can get away from you sometimes. You know, so I'm curious what y'all gonna do as it grows.
Well, I would say, as speaking for myself, is just to make sure that I deliver the quality needed to make the story that Kwanzaa is telling possible for the audience that wants to read it. I think as an artist, or just as a creator, like it's interesting that you mentioned a little jealous, like that fuels me to be better when I look at my peers and see what they're doing. Like, oh, I gotta go back to the lab. I thought I was done with the lab for now, but I gotta go back in. Jamal, yeah, that's you. I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you. I look at his artwork and I'm just like, oh yeah, I do have to work on my fingers. Darn it. Okay, and then it drives me forward. So, and I can't wait to bring that energy back into the project. So not only do I impress myself with the next level when I put something to in a project that I work on, but I also want like Kwanzaa to look up and be like, oh, that looks amazing, like good job. Or like even Jamal or Vita, like anybody look at it and say, oh, I remember when you did it like this, but you're doing it like this. And even if they don't say anything, I just want them to feel like I'm taking it seriously and I'm progressing with it.
Jamal, can you tell us a little bit about what your art approach is to the sequel to White, since it's focusing on a little bit of a different aspect of the main story, it sounds like, from what I've read in the solicits and the synopsis?
Well, it's less in focus. It's not so much that it's focusing on a different aspect of the story. It actually picks up 3 years after the first book.
Okay.
So
directly.
it's a direct sequel, and because there's an actual gap in time, there's an evolution with all the characters. Like I was saying before, Kareem, who is now publicly known as X, he's feeling his oats in this story. I mean, he is a gun-toting, motorcycle riding, sword-wielding badass. And it's, in a lot of ways, my approach to White is very similar to what I did in Black #6, where there's much more of an action influence. It's much more of an action story in a lot of ways, but at the same time, going back to that family aspect, there's a clear evolution of all the relationships, especially his relationship with Juncture, and Juncture's relationship with O, and everything else that goes along. So my approach is really just, I've had 3 years, in between series to, while I was working on other things, to pull the things that I learned while working on The Wrong Earth, for example, and bring that into White. So there was a clear, like, I look at the two series and there's a clear progression between the two. Like, they're similar, but there's more, for me, there's more structure to everything in White. And I've worked very hard to make it feel even as complete as I feel like we did with Black. I feel like there are panels that I spent a couple of days on, not pages, panels.
Yeah, well, that prison scene at the end of 6, that whole prison showdown at the detainment camp. Exhausting.
It was, but like.
And Kwanzaa, how many characters did you want to put in there? 103.
All right, like here's the thing though. Here's the thing though. As much as I tortured Jamal to script ideas, I also know he was like literally the only dude who could do it. Like, it just like bring that level to it where it's like he never comes up short on the details, and that's what I wanted to see in the book. So
yeah, it opens, White #1 opens with a scene on the South Lawn of the White House with a reporter scrum. I drew the White House with like hundreds of reporters on the South Lawn.
Looked awesome.
It took 2 days. And that was just one panel on the page. So
respect the process. Respect the process.
got
a lot of the things that people don't even think about, like when as an artist, you're like, all right, you have to draw this room. What goes into a room? A chair, a desk, a lamp, a keyboard, garbage on the floor. Like, we don't know who's going to pay attention to that, but as an artist, we know we have to put it in there and take the time to do it. And that's really what can separate artists from each other, is putting those details in to tell the story like the writer wants it to be told. Like, to study that craft and do it, it's good job, man.
I always feel like that's the biggest flex for like artists, man, where you could just like, if you really want to stun on somebody, just be like, I want you to draw some Air Force Ones untied. One shoe doesn't have any laces in the corner, with a sock hanging off of it. like it's in the corner. Like, everybody wants to draw the dude flying through the sky, though.
The messy bedroom, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, and I think Kwanzaa, I remember reading I'm sure it's become its own monster and the spin-offs and everything, but originally it was supposed to be like a 3-part series, right? Black, now White, and then there's kind of like a over.
That's still the intention.
That's still the intention? Okay.
Yeah, there's a third and final book to cap it off. I think
I know what it's going to be called, but I'll talk to you about that later. I don't ruin it.
Yeah, no, it's very much kind of like the Star Wars like trilogy in that. There's New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. So if that gives you any inclination of what's going to go down, there you go.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. One of our students asked a question to all the creators and writers of the book. What are your favorite comics or mangas that you enjoy?
Oh, well, I showed DDD, Dead Demon Destruction. So that's one that I'm reading right now. My all-time favorite manga is Akira.
Nice.
And
classic.
yeah, I mean, it wasn't the first one that I ever read. The first one I read was Appleseed, but Akira was the
Nice.
one that I gravitated to. So, but as in terms of comics, like I try to read a little bit of everything. I'm reading Firepower by Robert Kirkman and Chris Samnee. What else am I let's see, Future State Next Batman by John Ridley. Good stuff, like really, really good stuff. Reading some Marvel. I go into a store. I don't have a pull list. I go into
just going wild.
Yeah, I go in wild. I see.
Open pocketbook. You got bank. You just buy it and buy.
Not even just like somebody help me. Just drop books in my hand.
No, I go. You know what? I go into my LCS. I walk in. I see what's on the shelf. If it's something that I'm reading or I'm collecting, then I'll grab it. Or if it's something that grabs my eye, I'll check it out. If there's a new creator that I want to see what they're doing, or somebody that I'm from, So that's I'm not a collector in that regard. Like I'm not a guy who has to have an entire run of something in order to enjoy it. I used to be, but somewhere along the line, being in this business for as long as I've been in, you learn to expand your palette.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like for so long I was just reading for homework in a good way. Reading comics for homework is awesome. But lately I've just been trying to read for pleasure. It's not capes at all. So I've been reading Department of Truth by James Tynion.
That's really good.
And it's so good. It scares me every issue. They do such a good job.
That and his Something That's Killing the Children.
I love Something That's Killing the Children. For me though, man, Department of Truth feels like Vertigo at its height. It's just so different. And then manga wise, my favorite manga of all time is Flame of Recca, which none of y'all kids know what that is. But I've been reading or rereading 20th Century Boys lately.
I just started reading that,
so good.
How are you the same age as me? What you know about some Flame of Recca?
My very first tattoo was a Flame of Recca tattoo, man.
Wow.
That's how I roll. And of course Akira. I feel like you gotta bow down to the greatest.
Oh,
absolutely. I got that beautiful hardcover box.
Oh, you bought that one?
I had to.
I saw that and I was like, I'll get it one day.
I pre-ordered it.
The cheapest thing.
Yeah. It was great. I feel I think we read stuff that isn't comics, right? We all try to expand our creative input by being this other thing that has nothing to do with what I do for a living.
This is how I get down.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Oh my God. I used to have the color versions, which wild.
Oh yeah, the color one. I had those. I think
is what we're saying.
Manga wise, I'm reading probably Demon Slayer. That's really popular, obviously. Platinum End. I like that a lot. Same people who did Death Note, if everyone's familiar with Death Note. Comic book wise, I like reading X-Men. I like reading Black Panther. And I read a lot of webtoon stuff. I love looking at their creative energy. It's people who have a voice of all kinds of comic books, whether LGBT, all of it. I like reading all types of stories. And I think novel wise, I always go to The Stranger by Mark Twain. That's one of my favorite books to read. I can read it over and over and over.
That's a great one.
That was from Zakaya, by the way. Ashley asks, I wanted to ask, I plan to become a creator myself when I grow up and put my own original ideas to work with my art and go to making animation as well. Do you have any advice for me? I also love the way you all work together and got to put this whole idea into something she wanted to say as well. So what would advice would you give Ashley if she wanted to create her own and then also maybe get into animation?
Okay. Well, first, I'm gonna tell y'all my favorite manga now. I'm gonna answer that question.
So
No. I
sorry.
didn't answer the question though, but like,
Sorry.
but anything by like Shuzo Shimi. So kind of not your standard manga like writer. One of their most famous pieces is The Flowers of Evil, and recent piece was Happiness. So if you want to read some manga that's gonna like, it's just gonna hit. It's not. We're not talking about like the shonen rivalry stuff. We're talking about stuff where you're reading it, you're going like, I can't believe this is happening right now. I can't believe what I'm reading. Like what's coming up next. This is off the wall, like bonkers kind of stuff that just like you wake up thinking about it. That's what kind of manga it is. You wake up and you're just like, I don't know what mess I read last night, but that was crazy.
It's changed my brain.
So yeah, definitely check out their work. And for comics, like I've really been back into the X-Men line. The whole Krakoa thing has just been that's been my hit. So like that's my crack. That's what brought me back into like reading serials and stuff. So like that's my crack right now. Like I love that they flexed on the entire world. So
Yeah,
I'm here for it.
that Fox series was awesome.
Yeah. But as for advice about like breaking in, the great thing that has changed since, I first came in the industry, and I think everybody here can speak to that, is that there's just so many more avenues that don't involve like, a path that necessarily means working with a publisher. Like that's literally an option now. You can do that and your own stuff and that, and it's not really like set in stone. Like, oh, I have to, go and write Spider-Man in order to be a comic creator. It's like you can just do whatever you want. And like we started Black on Kickstarter. It was the first thing that I had ever written as a comic book. And I think that having those resources like Webtoon, like Tim was talking about, are just so many avenues to just like put your vision out there and not worry about like it meeting somebody's criteria either, because there's a lot of people who like I see their stuff and they're like the big hit people like right now, like especially on Webtoon, where it's like if they had gone through a traditional publisher, they would have heard no like it was their first name.
Webtoon and even Comixology, you can put up your own stuff. Like it's really wild. They just give you access, just keys to the kingdom. Like it's awesome.
Yeah, at our club meeting like 2 weeks ago when we started meeting online virtually the past month, Arafat and some of the kids were just going deep into Webtoons and all the stuff that they're into and sharing.
It's so cool.
So it was great to see that they already are in that system of looking for those kind of works and those creators, and definitely cool to see. What else, guys?
Oh, the biggest thing that I would probably say to all of you is don't be afraid to do something. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't do anything, even because you can, because the options are out there. Even in terms of, say you want to write Spider-Man, but you don't really want to work for Marvel. There's a phrase that a lot of my friends like to use. It's called filing the serial numbers off. Which is,
love it.
You have a character or a character type that you want to do. You can still do the stories that you want to do, just don't make them about Spider-Man.
Invincible.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because like there are so few stories that have to be someone else's characters. Like there are some things you can only do with Spider-Man because of his history.
Right.
Most of your story ideas, they could just be your own thing. And honestly, like it will be just as cool and even cooler to you because it's your own thing. Like
exactly.
It's also like, I think that my advice would be study the things that you really like and kind of figure out why you like them, not to copy what they have done, but to figure out what speaks to you story-wise, because I think that, the thing that I have seen amongst, even friends that want to do stuff but end up not doing it is that they have this motivating idea, but then because they didn't really think it all the way through, which is fine. We don't always think it all the way through. They lose momentum. And so I feel like when you study the things that you really like, you go, okay, but why did that work for me? How do I do that in my own universe? Great. Now I have a new idea to keep this going forward. So like reread, I reread the Annihilation novel like yearly. I love that book. I think that book is awesome. I'm never going to write a novel like that because I'm not that person, but I'm like, why does this work for me? Great. All right. Now, how do I apply that to the stuff that I want to do? Is it a character that I think their journey is really cool? Another cheating thing that I think a lot of people do is you take like a classic story structure and you go, I'm going to put my characters in it and see how that works.
Mm-hmm.
I've done it. I publish stuff like that boldly because it's all public domain, so I don't care. I wrote a book that was just the Orpheus and Eurydice myth, but it was set in a New York City subway system, right? So like that was Hades instead. But because of the characters, it's different, right? Like it's just the story structure. So yeah, studies all the stuff that you like. That's an excuse to go reread and rewatch stuff that you like, by the way.
And then one of the teachers asked, I guess it kind of builds on that same question. So once you've got the creative aspect of it in your mind and your passion and your heart, and you've been working on your skills, how do you take it to that next step to then transition it into a career?
Well, it depends on what your goal is, and not everybody's goal is per se to work for a larger company. Some people's goals are to do a webtoon. Some people's goals are to publish independently. Some people's goals are to do a webcomic, on an independent webcomic. You have to decide what your venue is going to be. Like for me, for example, I am a child of the industry that made me. So I started as an intern at DC Comics. I spent a good portion of my career at DC Comics as an artist up until 2012. But since then, I have been doing primarily creator-owned projects or projects that I have some sort of participation in. And I prefer that. I prefer doing my own thing as opposed to being part of another company's, branding, opportunity. I'd rather build my own brands, for example. So, that's, one goal. But there are people who are perfectly happy being the next artist on Spider-Man. And that's their goal. That's what they want. That's what they want to do. They want to work for Marvel for the rest of their life. There's nothing wrong with that. But you have to, and the same thing, it's some people want to do newspaper strips, you have to, you're always going to be honing your skills. That's just an ongoing, being creative is not a sprint. It's a marathon. It's a marathon with an ever moving goal. So, you're always going to be growing, you're always going to be changing, you're always going to be adapting new skills. You're going to always bring that skill set into whatever you're doing creatively. And even, when you are doing something like comics, you're doing mainstream comics, for example, that could lead you into doing other things. Me working in comics, I ended up doing work in advertising, I ended up doing work in television, I ended up doing work in small budget film, I do stuff with March for Our Lives, the ultimate thing is you're always constantly going to be working on your skill set. But as you're working on your skill set, you have to start making decisions on where your focus is going to be. And once you decide where your focus is going to be, then you can start kind of narrowing, what it is exactly that you need to do and who you need to get in contact with. At some point, hopefully, conventions will start happening, or there will be a way for younger creators to meet with editors virtually or something.
I will say, I know that Marvel, and I think DC does it too, but I can't remember, but I know Marvel does, if you're an artist specifically looking for work, they will give you scripts to test on. They have testing scripts, they have testing, like all that kind of stuff. And that's stuff that you can just do. Like they have a system built in place for that.
Okay.
As a writer, not so much, but but if you're also, like, to your point, if you're looking to do the more traditional route, then there's a lot of resources out there that'll kind of help you shift and focus into that. But if you're looking to do your own thing, like to Jamal's point, you have to just start doing it. You have to find people that are at your level, that your peers that are trying to break in, that are trying to do it. And then you start making things together, because the people that get noticed to be published by, you know, even independent publishers, or even by book publishers, right? Book publishing is a whole another side to things, but it's also very good. They're the people that have they're self-starters. So, you know, if you want to make a book with your buddy, make a book with your buddy. Will it be the best book ever? Probably not. That's okay.
No, but you're
You'll
putting
get
it out
another
there.
book.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would even say, like, to both your points, a young creator, being age or just experience into the industry, whatever you're getting into, I think a lot of young creators will start with an idea. They got this fantastic idea in their mind. It's on the big silver screen. It's in bookstores everywhere. And then they start drawing it. They start creating it and start to realize there's a lot of work that goes into this. It's not a 5-year-old kid making these things. These are real people spending a lot of time putting this together. And what they realize is maybe this idea isn't what I thought it was going to be, or I got another idea that's even better than this one. So they just stop short of the first one and they keep bouncing to the next, looking to really hone something to get out into the world. My suggestion would be stick with the original idea. Really work through the process, because you're going to start loving it, then you're going to start to hate it, then you're going to start to love it. And you may love it or hate it at the end, but you're going to learn so much from it that your next one is going to be awesome. And at least you can look back and say, I finished that, instead of working on these half projects, you know.
Yes.
That's going to help you be ready for the industry no matter where you're going to go. Self-creative on your own book or work for any company, you can complete a project from beginning to end and you will learn a lot from it.
I feel attacked right now, Tim. Why are you coming for me like that? I feel attacked right now. Why are you coming for me like that? We in public.
It's funny. It reminds me of something. The best advice I ever got from one of my professors. Actually, I was having anxiety attacks in college, and I had to postpone. I was supposed to lead like a class one week, and I had to postpone it because I was just having like a breakdown. Like, I can't get through this. I'm trying to get this. He said, you know, you've shown that you can do the work. You've shown that you care. Don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. And make sure you're finding what you can do, follow through it, and put something together, because sometimes it's about finishing and getting that product out there so that you can improve and move on to the next thing.
Exactly.
In all seriousness, that's exactly the reason why Black is here, because my wife was the one who, you know, I'm always telling her my ideas and stuff like that, and she didn't even like comics, so she's just like, that's cool. But it was literally her saying, like, just pick one. She's like, these all sound fantastic. Just pick one and do that one. And it just happened to be Black. So,
so she was
everybody's
for animation, I think the question was, how do you get started in animation? Like, I'm not an animator, but I do know young people that want to get into animation. So I kind of listen to them and their story. So the only thing I can say to that is you need, and I think this goes for any artist, you need a library. Like, if you studied another language, the first thing you have to do is know words, because that's the language, right? We take it for granted because we speak English very well. But if you're going to learn language, you got to learn all the words. If you had to use the bathroom, you wanted to order something to drink, you got to know how to say those things. Art is the same way. You need to build a mental library of objects in your mind so that you know how they move, how they function, the weight of it. If someone's going to sit on a chair in your comic book, you have to draw a sturdy looking chair. If they're going to walk across the room or throw a chair in an animation, you have to have weight on that chair. So building your mental library of different objects artistically will help in animation and will help in drawing comic books. And will help the writer when they tell a story. I've had scripts where they say, draw a 1948 German tank. I'm like, wait, I was just going to draw a tank with the typical tank with the little, you know, cannon barrel thing. I don't even know what it's called, but you know what a tank looks like. But if you really want to get down to it, there's a specific look for a specific thing that you have to draw and know how it moves, how much it weighs, when you put a person next to it, how big it is, how heavy it's going to be, the color of it. All that trickles into each other from animation to comic books. So building your mental library is important.
Next question was, what got you into comics at the beginning, or art or writing? What was the start for you?
I'll start off. My dad let me read. He said I can read anything I want and write anything I want and draw anything I want as long as I did it creatively. So I tested that theory out, and I wrote a book. Well, not a book, I'm sorry. I wrote my idea of a book, which was like a page, just to see what he said. It had so many cuss words in it and my idea of a sex scene. I'm like, yeah, let's see what he does with this. And he looked at it and said, all right, this is what you did wrong. And I'm like, wait, what? You mean I could write that? And then I read a book that had a lot of graphic material in it. And I showed him, I was reading it. And he said, okay, and what do you like about it? I'm like, all right, wait a minute. This is interesting here. He's letting me get away with things that I can't normally do in an artistic form. And that's when I really started to pay attention to comic books and like reading novels and stuff.
Yeah, no, I come from a slightly different bent. I was the kid who got in trouble because he would take the aluminum foil from the kitchen and make action figures out of them.
You're wasting that foil.
That's awesome. I used to love doing that. Wasting foil, but I used to love doing that.
Wasting foil. Something that my cousin reminded me of last week. That, and I apparently, and I forgot about this, I used to jump out of the hall closet whenever my mom and my aunt would come home, rip my shirt open like the Incredible Hulk.
Did they teach you how to sew real quick? Because
no, but I mean, it just kind of seemed like superheroes were always around me, especially being a child of the 70s. Like it just felt that way. And then my grandfather took me to see Superman the movie, and that was the thing that just sort of tipped the scale over and really got me interested in Superman in particular, but comic books as an extension. So it wasn't until I would probably say the 5th or 6th grade, like I was always doing like little mini comics and stuff in school. You know, I'd get in trouble because I'd like finish my work in class and then crawl under the desk and start drawing, and then everybody else would want to see what I was drawing, so they would get out of their desk and they would come kind of see, and I became a distraction. So probably around, I want to say the 6th or 7th grade, that's when I realized that this was really a little bit more than just and just something fun to do. And then when I got to the High School of Art and Design in the 9th grade, me and some of my friends during freshman year, we cut school early and went to take the Marvel tour when they were over on Park Avenue South.
yeah.
So that's when it really dawned on me, like, oh my God, this is an actual business. Like there's offices and desks and people. Like you hear
it wasn't a 12-year-old running the whole organization.
Well, no, it was. I mean,
mentally, probably yes.
Probably. I think in my head at the time, I assumed it was more like, well, the way things are right now, currently, where everybody was just sort of scattered all over the place doing stuff. But I did not realize that there was how involved the business side of the comics industry was. And I became really fascinated with that. So the creative side of me never changed. Like my goal was always to become a comic book artist, but at the same time, I wanted to learn the inside baseball side of the industry. So I did my internship at DC when I was in high school. I did a 6-month internship. You know, over the years, I've worked for various independent companies doing production and editorial, and I was the marketing director for a company for 3 years. So, yeah, I mean, that was basically it. I mean, you know, Superman lit the fuse, but you know, comic books in general just kind of was always there for me.
Yeah. I think my first grown folks movie was Batman in 1989 when I was 4 years old. And that just messed up my brain. Like it just scrambled that all up. No 4-year-old should see that movie probably.
My kid's obsessed with Burton.
I'm telling you right now, that changes the chemical makeup of your brain.
It already has. He's all about Nightmare Before Christmas. Obsessed.
And we would watch all kinds of like sci-fi movies. My
Mhm.
mom's a big sci-fi fan. She's Star Trek and all that kind of stuff. And we watched Alien, and then the Alien toys, the like marine toys used to come with little comics in them.
Right.
He's like, those toys should not have been for children either. But
Hey, listen, this was the same period where they tried to turn RoboCop into a children's cartoon.
let me tell you, I watched all of that stuff, right? But I didn't really get into comics until I was a teenager. I read manga since I could read. And I started reading when I was 10. So I started a little late because I was busy just running my mouth. And when I realized I could put down all the stuff that was going on in my head onto paper so I could save it for later, that really changed the game for me. That's why I learned how to read, so that I could take all of the wild stuff that was going on in here and just save it for later. Maybe it'll serve me at some point. But then when I was a teenager, I started working in a comic book shop because I was angry at high school and I wanted to not do that anymore. So I decided to work in a comic book shop, and it saved my life. There's a book called Strangers in Paradise. There are two books that saved my life. One of them is Dawn by Octavia Butler, and that saved my life when I was in early high school. Literally would not be here without it. And the second is Strangers in Paradise, which I already knew I was gay. Like that was not in question at this point, but I'd never really seen, queer people, especially queer women, depicted in a way that was not exploitive before. And to see that in a book, and they were the main characters and they were just having their lives. Like it's kind of a crime book and kind of a slice of life book. And it meanders, but like to see them just being characters to me, like changed my life. My first comic when I was a little kid was like an X-Men comic and a Wonder Woman comic. So like to me, I was like, and I mistook Wonder Woman as Puerto Rican. So to me, like superheroes were brown people. Like I was like, Wonder Woman's Puerto Rican, and then we have Storm and Bishop, and we're done. That's great. But then, it didn't even occur to me that you could be like gay and just live a life that wasn't full of tragedy. And yes, there's tragedy in Strangers in Paradise, but ultimately it's a joyous book about these two women who love each other so much that they keep finding each other. And like, I was like, oh, I want to do this. I didn't know this was possible. Octavia Butler taught me that I could like write as a Black person, and then Strangers in Paradise taught me that I had a place as a queer person. And so I just decided to make that my whole brand.
Awesome. And did everybody go?
Kwanzaa's frozen. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh no, not frozen. No, I was listening to all of your stories, and my trajectory is the same. I mean, I broke into comics by being an intern at Marvel as well, and every time I thought I was out, they dragged me back in. Yeah, I loved comics like from the moment I could read. So 2 years old and up, I was born nerdy, and that's why I'm here doing this.
Arafat actually wanted to ask a question verbally. So Arafat, are you there? You can unmute your mic if you're there.
Hi, I'm here.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I didn't know how I would explain it typing. So my question is, technically, I feel that race would matter in this point, but what race are the villains in the stories?
That's a good question. That's a very good
well, in Black, I would personally say that I don't see any of the characters as villains, because much like I was saying earlier, like nobody really has real nemesis and arch enemies in their lives. I think that they're just people with like conflicting viewpoints, even the ones who you might typecast as like, you are a villain, and that will very likely be true. I like to think of them as like different viewpoints. I think because as they're springing out of my head, I don't want to think that I'm having those evil thoughts I'm writing them. So I'm trying to like essentially, like if I'm writing a character like Theodore Mann, I'm like, oh, well, I am not a rich white man who is bent on stealing the powers of like Black people. But if I was, okay, why would I be that sort of person? So for me, like he does things as villainous, but I don't think of him as a villain, because through his story, his upbringing, his family and stuff like that, he's the way that he is, you know. And that doesn't mean that the protagonist shouldn't punch him in his face and shouldn't try to stop him from what he's doing. But I don't vilify him in that way, because I think so much of who people are is in part nurture, as much as nature, like that. You take a character like that, and I especially do that in White with his son, where it's just like, how do you create someone like Donald Trump Jr.? Like, if he was raised by some other people, he would be a different person, but he was raised by this jackass, so he is this person. And what frames and shapes that? And you can say that he's a villain. You can say that, and I'm not gonna deny like
I'll
your
say it. I'll
take
say
on
it because you can't, because you're being politic. He is a villain.
No, I'm not saying it to be political. I'm just saying it in terms of like my creative process and like just how I view these characters and like I try to frame them. It's like, the actions are the villainy and stuff like that, but like how do I dive into their brain and like give some kind of like reasoning and motivation for it, so that it's not something that's two-dimensional where it's just like, I hate Black people and I'm evil.
Right. Well, that's what it is to be creative, right? Like that's what it is to make a sympathetic villain. Like they can be the villain, they are the bad guy, but you're like, there are reasons why this person is bad, but like they still the villain. Those mans, they the villain.
Oh yeah.
That's how I look at it too.
Yeah, sorry, I got excited. No, like again, they're still villains, no matter what. Like in end of the day, they're still bad, and deserving of punches in the face. But there's also the thing that kind of makes it sweet too, where it's just like they don't even know why they're getting punched in the face. Like from their frame of from their point of view, like why won't you let me hate you?
There's nothing worse in any story than a cardboard cutout of a villain. Like that will turn me off immediately. But also a little bit like whatever you could come up with is not nearly as bad as the real people. So
yeah. But there's also like the character of like Caesar, who's Juncture's son. Like people can think of him as a villain as well.
Yeah.
And he has a very, very opposite worldview of like Kareem and his father, Juncture, where because he's willing to commit acts of terror, he is a villain, but he is doing it for reasons that he feels will protect his race, and his culture. And so it's an interesting thing.
There's a little jealousy going on.
There definitely is. I mean, and there's also tragedy because he blames his father for things that happened in their past. So he is a villain in this story,
he
but
is a villain.
He is villainous and stuff, but he got reasons. Like he got reasons.
That's the best kind of
in
villain.
America's Sweetheart, you see that too.
Yes.
In America's Sweetheart, you definitely see Eli and I won't give much away, but Eli and the person Eli's butting heads with, they definitely are both justified in their approach to the world because of where they come from. But obviously, when it comes to the well-being of the whole, that's where the disagreement comes in, and how to address those problems and that history, or in that case future, and the way it plays out is that's one of the things I kept coming back to in all the stories. Is I brought that up earlier. I love that the conflict was twisted at some point, that not what you expected it to be. It's not just always the man family. There's elements of disagreement that become the argument, just like in real life, and the argument is the villain in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and it all depends on perspective too, because like I'm far angrier at like a Candace Owens than I am at Trump. I'm like, Trump, who you are, girl. What's your problem? It's just like.
Mm-hmm. And I know you guys, I appreciate your time, so we'll do one more question. I know there was a couple other good student ones, and if I exclude anybody, I apologize. There was one I remember seeing that I definitely wanted to get to. There was have you ever had who was it that asked? I want to make sure I credit the person. It was Guadalupe. Have you used real life experiences in your comics, and what were the struggles in the creation process? Not just of these comics, but maybe in other works that you've done. So how much does your real life play into elements of either the story or the art in your work?
a lot for me.
Every,
Uh,
Same.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
feel
draw
like,
a lot from personal experience. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, clearly, well, I don't know about Charles' lives, but you know, there aren't a lot of superpowered people running around causing havoc in my life, but it's just normal people. Uh, but I feel like the most meaningful work that you do comes from a place inside you. You can kind of tell when someone doesn't care or doesn't know what they're talking about, if that makes sense. And so, in order to kind of have that authenticity, and I'm not talking about necessarily if the character is like you or not, but more like an authenticity of perspective, you have to put yourself in your work, which is why creating is so scary. Creating is a really terrifying process in which you go, here's my soft underbelly, please don't stab it a bunch. Like, so yeah, a bunch.
Yeah, I would definitely agree to that. Slice of life into what I go through every day to what I create just makes it more real, more believable to enjoy what I'm doing with the confidence that I'm doing it right, so that someone can understand it. And if it's something that you don't know about, you shouldn't do it, or you should research the mess out of it, ask questions as much as possible to understand it better. Or you should just not do it. You know, if it's not your world, don't do it, because people will see through it.
Yeah, I think that you have to find a way to connect to whatever work you're doing, whether it's creator owned or licensed stuff. You have to find the thing in you that is also in the character and kind of put that forward.
And even with the art, studying anatomy, clothing, room designs, things like that, I'm sure that plays a huge part in the creative process.
Oh, absolutely. I do a ton of research for everything. I have my quote unquote morgue file has its own dedicated folder on a separate hard drive on my computer. I keep everything, and it is not as well cataloged as it used to be, but it's pretty well cataloged.
Yeah, that goes back to the library. Keep that mental library of all these experiences in your head. I think, but Legend of Zelda, popular video game, that idea came about when a creator wandered outside and went into a cave around his neighborhood and walked out like, oh, that was cool. He remembered that from his childhood and created Legend of Zelda from it. Like just that one experience. That's kind of like what you build up in your life, you know, in your mental library of all the events and things that's unfolded, you know, you use it.
Did he get the Triforce while he was in there?
He got the
Master Sword.
Started throwing boomerangs at people's heads. It was great.
I got a question for on my screen. The two artists are on either side of me. Do you put pieces of other people in your work? I think here about like gestures or like postures or any of that kind of stuff, because one of the things that I like about both of your work is that each character feels very individual. They feel like real people, and so I wonder how much of that too is going, people with, you know, that I know with this attitude stand in this way or do these kinds of things.
You know, I do think a lot about body language, and I think a lot about I try to put myself into every character. And then sometimes I'll specifically pull from someone in pop culture and base a character on them as well. I'm working on a story right now where two of the characters are based on Fred Gwynn and Victor Buono from the old Batman TV series. So
I didn't even know what that name was. I was like, I'm listening like, who?
Okay. King Tut from Batman.
Yeah.
Nice. I think when I'll create a character and I'll think of a character and say, okay, this character could either be based off someone I know or a person I've seen, walk down the street that I'm familiar with. So I get the rhythm of that character that fits. But to make that character pop in my mind, I'll have to pair that character as best I can to another character where I just completely animate that character. Straight up JoJo pose it, You know, and they're next to, like, you got this one character just standing there like they would at anyone waiting at a bus stop, but that character could seem more important because you have another character next to them that's just so extreme. You can't help but to look at both, and neither one will compete against each other. They just kind of favor off on each other, and I try to do that as often as I can to some extreme.
Very cool. So we're gonna wrap it up because I know we're way over time, and you guys have been so kind and so generous, and it was so cool of you to do all this. One thing I want to add, I was gonna raffle off some stuff at the end, but I went over the count of how many students are here. First of all, when we do, get fortunate enough to be back in person in school, we do have the entire library for the kids to read in our graphic novel library for the club that we keep kind of separate for the kids in school. And also, every person who came to the meeting tonight is either going to get a copy of Black or Devil's Die mailed to them this
Oh, wow.
because I picked
That's fantastic
for the kids. So I'll be mailing those out over the span of like the next week or so. Since there was a handful of kids, I can do it for everybody. I have to order one more. I did the count. So I was like, I'm close enough. Just give me a week to get the extra copy sent to me. But everyone's gonna get one sent home to them because we do prize raffles at our club meetings and stuff too, and it's random and it's a few kids each week. But for something like this, I want to do something special, and I want the kids to have something to enjoy and remember it by. So they're all going to get the book sent home to them, one of the two-ish trades that everyone here contributed to in one form or another. So I want to make sure everyone was included in that from a creator perspective as well. So Devil's Die or Black, you're going to find a copy in the mail. So I kept the list, and what I'll do is I'll reach out to those kids through school contact to get their mailing address. And then probably sometime beginning of next week, those will go out in the mail. So I want to let them know that. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. It means the world that you're willing to do this. It's really cool of you to take your time and to talk to me. I probably talk too much, and to talk to kids and to take the time to, just to be here and share your experiences and share your wealth of knowledge and hopefully influence and energize some of these kids, because I hear what they're talking about at club, and they're already talking about making stories, creating things, showing their artwork. And that's
always good to hear.
Yeah, come take our job.
So I can't wait to get back in school, because when we were in person, like 30 kids that meet every week for this kind of thing. So it's been great. It's been great getting back online with the kids and having something like this to build up to as we start back up virtually, and hopefully get back to school in person. God knows when, but safe, hopefully soon. Thank you all so much for coming. Anything else you want to add before we go?
Be safe.
Yeah, be safe.
Come take our jobs.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. I want to get as many new people into making comics and making animation and making stories possible, so that I can retire and just read the stuff and watch it. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, for all you anime fans out there, you just gotta have that kind of Naruto Sasuke rivalry and that generational sort of Hokage Leaf Village vibe going on. It's
Bring
like
it.
you can be the next Hokage.
I like to think of myself more as a Piccolo, and I'm just looking for my Gohan to train up.
Oh, very nice. Very
Oh
nice.
man, that has like an element of abuse to it now.
Deku. That's so good. Guadalupe,
You're trying
you're
to say
great.
you want to go Vita with
My daughter's waiting for you. I'll have her. I'll drive her down to you. She's gonna be your Gohan. I'm telling you right now.
Excellent. That's what I love to hear.
No, thank you all so much. Thank you for taking the time. Wish you all the best. Stay safe, stay well, and enjoy your time, enjoy your family, enjoy the life that you're living while we can. And hopefully I'll see you guys at a con sometime soon.
Absolutely.
Sometime soon. Everyone,
Yeah, hope so.
I got some of those
Thank
black
you.
blanks I'll be hunting you guys down for when I see you in person next
All
time.
right.
Awesome.
Look at
Love
those.
it. Love it.
those
Yeah,
clean
thank you.
colors.
All right. Have a good night, guys.
Take care, everybody.
Have a good night,
Thank you so
everyone.
much. Thank you for your time. Be
Hey.
safe. Take care. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Mr. Hoplock, I have a question on behalf of my
Hold
brother.
on. Let me just stop recording before you ask your question. And this is from
Okay.